crazy, but crazy things have happened.
The logistics worked out today.
I spoke to you all today, so it worked out. On my end, it worked out. So that's him. It's right already. Okay. Do you have a backup audio? You can do it? You can do it? Not so much. Okay, sure. Yaakov probably usually gets it off this thing, so it's not. For some reason, the recording app that I have, like I can't send it on WhatsApp. I have to download it to my email account. The email's like a whole thing. I think I have the wrong one. You can record? Like I always say, I'm doing it for you guys that are here. You know what I'm saying? But once I'm doing it anyway, might as well start recording. All right. Okay.
Anything else?
It's fine. It's okay. We have to believe that. In Yaakov, I trust. He's going to get it out of this thing.
I don't think he pulled it up there.
He's done it before, yeah.
Yeah? We'll start off hopefully the last.
Yeah. It'll be okay. Should be okay. All right. Okay, so Parshas Vaeira begins. Rabbanan Shalom. I guess it really Parshas Vaeira begins with picking up from last week already. So we know that at the end of last week's Parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu comes with a really a very basic question to Rabbanan Shalom, which is why have you done bad to this people? Why have you sent me? In other words, the question that Moshe Rabbeinu is asking is highlighted due to the fact that he was just sent to take Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, which means that the shlichus that he was on is to bring redemption, and it seems the shlichus that he went on intensify the galus. But really Moshe Rabbeinu, Chazal interpreted like this, that Moshe Rabbeinu is really just using this as a springboard to ask the most basic question, which is, like, what is this whole Indian of Galus Mitzrayim about? Like, why are you causing such problems? Why are you causing such sorrows to Yidden? We know that, listen, and that's a very fundamental question. What was the purpose of the suffering of Mitzrayim? What was the purpose of that? And we have to understand that although usually we associate difficulty and Yisurin as a kapar for Aveiros, which certainly has its roots in Chazal, and even for Galus Mitzrayim, you could explain, there's Mechiras Yosef, there was, Moshe Rabbeinu himself hints in Parshas Shmos to the fact that there was Lashon Hara being spoken. Okay. But at the end of the day, the Galus of Mitzrayim was predestined already before Mechiras Yosef, right? It goes back to Avram Avinu, Bris Ben Absarim, Yudai Teda, Kiger Yizracha, Beretz Leilahem, Avadim Vino Isam. It was already predestined that there's going to be a Galus Mitzrayim. And so the question is, what's the tachlis of this? What was the tachlis of Galus Mitzrayim? What was it coming to rectify? Now, the truth is, this is a question that you could ask about Galus Mitzrayim, but in a broader sense, it's a question on life itself. I hate to start a shir on such a downer, but life is one that's full of yisurim. It's full of difficulties. It's full of miniyas. Again, chas v'shalom, it shouldn't be big yisurim, but like the Gemara says, ad heichen tachlis yisurim. The Gemara says even when a person puts in their hand in their pocket to pick out a certain amount of change, and they pick out a less amount of change, and you have to put their hand back in, that's also called yisurim. In other words. And that's all the time. All of life is full of what is technically classified as Yisurim. And so to think that the entire tachlis of Yisurim, of pain, of difficulty, is just to give an atonement to one's Aveiros, it's certainly maybe part of the explanation for why There's difficulties in life, but it can't be the full picture. It can't be. There's just every aspect of life is full of is at least colored by something that's imperfect. And so to say that all of that is because of Vaeira, it's very difficult to say, especially where on a national collective level, our first collective experience of difficulty was Mitzrayim, which was predestined before there was even a Jewish people to make any mistakes. So clearly there's some other siba, there's some other cause that's underlying this reality of there being Yisurin in the world. B'chlal u'b'frat. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu's question is. Lamar ha'yoseh lamazah shlachtani. So what is the answer? So the answer comes in the beginning of our parsha. And so that's what we're going to try to investigate, what the Rebbeinu Shalom is answering. What is the explanation for Galus Mitzrayim? And by extension, the underlying main pnimistic tachlis behind all Yisurin that a person can go through. Again, like I said, Yisurin can be chas v'shalom extreme, but even things, small discomforts, small discomforts, even things the Rebbeinu Shalom made the world in such a way, even things that are pleasurable, but if you do them too much or too often, they themselves become painful, right? Sitting down is nice. No one has a problem with sitting down, but if you sit down too long, right, then it also becomes uncomfortable, so you start shifting, right? So there is no such thing in creation that is just pure pleasure without it eventually, without pain rearing its ugly head. And that Yisurin was built into the Tanakh. And so this is a very fundamental question. We have to figure out what the answer is, what's the source of it. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Moshe Rabbeinu, and already it's contained in hinted to the first pasuk, V'yidaber Elokim al Moshe, right? That's Midas Hadin. V'yarmer Elav, and so Elokim, the Midas Hadin responds to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ani Havaya, Ani Hashem, Ani Yud Kevavke. Okay, so already in that the Rebbeinu Shalom is hinting to what he's about to clarify in the next pasuk, that somehow through Yisurin and through Midas Hadin, Elokim, a revelation of Yud Kevavke is able to be experienced. And that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom says. Vaeira el Avram el Yitzchak vel Yaakov bekel shakai. That I revealed myself to the Avos HaKadoshim, which was at a time before there was the difficulty of Galus Mitzrayim. And because they did not go through Galus Mitzrayim yet, the only relationship I was able to have with them was through the name Kel Shakai. Ushmi Yud Kevavke, but the name Havaya, Yud Kevavke, they did not know. In other words, this is the answer, that the reason for Yisurin, for the pain of Galus Mitzrayim, on a collective level, and Memela, whatever is true for Klal Yisrael is true for the individual person as well. Without Yisurin, God can only be experienced as Kel Shakai. With Yisurin, again, whatever Yisurin means, doesn't have to be something extreme. But with Yisurin, the Rebbeinu Shalom was now seen as Yud Kevavke. Okay, so obviously, that's where we're going to have to try to figure out what's the difference between the two. What does it mean, Yud Kevavke? In this pasuk, there's actually a contrast between without Galus Mitzrayim and with Galus Mitzrayim, and there's two differences. The more obvious difference is that without Galus Mitzrayim, it's Kel Shakai, and with Galus Mitzrayim, as a result of Galus Mitzrayim, it's Yud Kevavke. But there's also another slight difference. It's said without Galus Mitzrayim, pre-Galus Mitzrayim to the office, for example, it's Vaeira bekel Shakai. I appeared, I was seen by the office with the name Kel Shakai. But then the contrast is, but now with you, what's going to happen is Shmi Havaya lo yinadati lahem. That you, with Galus Mitzrayim, you're going to have Yud Kevavke, but it's not described as a vision, it's described as a das, as an inner awareness. That's, again, without explaining it, but these are the things we have to figure out. So again, that's what the pasuk is trying to answer. Now, keeping this in mind, we also have to sort of pair this, whatever this means of to know Yud Kevavke, which is the result of Galus Mitzrayim. We also have to clarify that must also be connected to another purpose of Galus Mitzrayim, which the pasuk also tells us. When Moshe Rabbeinu is by the burning bush, the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's in a number of psukim, and it's a running theme throughout these parshas, is that Galus Mitzrayim is going to happen. And the pasuk even over here talks about, at least part of it, is that as a result of Galus Mitzrayim, the Jewish people are going to be zaycha to two things. Tavdun eselakim al harazeh, they're going to get the Torah. And more than that, they're also going to get Eretz Yisrael. Right? That's what our parsha talks about. The four languages of Gula, Vevesi, and the fifth one is that I'm going to bring you to Eretz Yisrael, and so on. So, in other words, you have two different places in Chumash where there's sort of an explanation of what the purpose of Golos Mitzrayim is and what it leads to, right? So you have one place where the pasuk describes in our parsha that the result of Golos Mitzrayim and its gula results in Shmi Havaya Neidati, to know Yud Kei Vav Kei. Then you have other psukim, again, other conversations with Moshe Rabbeinu, where it's clear that as a result of Golos Mitzrayim, the Jewish people are going to get Har Torah and Eretz Yisrael. Now, putting that together, what that basically means is that what does it mean to know Yud Kei Vav Kei? It means not just Torah and not just Eretz Yisrael, but it means the Torah of Eretz Yisrael. That's what it means. Those two things these are both the result of Golos Mitzrayim, which means they're one and the same. So if the Torah says that the purpose of Golos Mitzrayim is to know Yud Kei Vav Kei, and at the same time the Torah says the purpose of Golos Mitzrayim is to get the Torah in Eretz Yisrael, so it means that there's such a thing as Torah, there's such a thing as Eretz Yisrael, but there's such a thing as Torah with Eretz Yisrael, or the Torah of Eretz Yisrael, and that is, another way of saying that is Shmi Havaya Nedati Lahem. Okay, you follow the math? That's what's going on over here. Okay, so we have to explain what this means. Okay, Aleph, Beis. There's a third place in Chumash where there is an explanation on some level to the purpose of Golos Mitzrayim, and this third explanation of Golos Mitzrayim also must be synonymous with what we've been saying until now. And what is that? So this is not so mefurish. So back in Parshas Shmos, when the Rabbanu Shalom again appears to Moshe Rabbeinu by the sneh, right? So it says over there's a burning bush, right? It's on fire. Moshe Rabbeinu sees it, and he says, "Asurna Vaeira," or he says, "Vini hasneh bar beish." He sees that there's a bush that's on fire, V'asnenu ukal, but it's not being consumed. It's not being burnt by the fire. So Moshe says, "Let me go turn and see what's going on over here. Madula yivar hasneh. How is it possible such a thing?" So the Rebbeinu Shalom sees that he's looking at the sneh, and the Rebbeinu Shalom speaks to Moshe, and it says as follows. It says that the Rebbeinu Shalom v'yar malach Hashem elav belabas eish mitoich hasneh. The Malach, the Rebbeinu Shalom appears to Moshe Rabbeinu, belabas eish mitoich hasneh, within the flame, the fire, the flames of the fire that was in the bush. That's what the pasuk describes. Okay, fine. Now, Chazal talk about that this, Rashi already brings down part of it, that this flame that the sneh is on fire, but it's not being consumed, that's a reference, that's a remez, a hint, a symbol of Golos Mitzrayim, of the exile. In other words, the bush is the Jewish people. The fire that should be consuming the bush is the difficulty, the suffering of Golos Mitzrayim. And Piderach HaTeva, the Jewish people should not have survived such an experience. Okay, and Moshe Rabbeinu is that's the wonder. Madula yivar hasneh. So this fire, according to Chazal, is a metaphor to Golos Mitzrayim. Okay, now we have a teaching from the Arizal. I've mentioned this Torah a number of other occasions as well. So this I'll just chazer it quickly, and you'll see what it's for. Okay, here's the idea. A person's name is very significant, right? A person's name is the name of your neshama, all the kochas and nefesh. All of your potential, all of your avoid, everything you have to accomplish in the world is contained in your name. It's contained in your name. Which means that when a person comes into the world and they're given a name, right? A boy or a girl, and they're given a name, it means that that's what your avoid is. It doesn't mean that your name is finished, right? Adarabah, your whole life is really to then work on your name and to really unpackage your name. That's why, just in parentheses, so, everyone's heard, Nach, Nachma, Nachma, right? So there is such an idea in the Tikkunei Zohar that tzaddikim in Olam Haba are called like that their name is drawn out like that, because a name being drawn out like that means that every part of the name has been worked through. There's no part that's just swallowed over, just, looked over. It's everything is pulled out. So that's what a person's avodah is. So it's like this. We have a principle that Arizal taught. Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama is a big neshama. Every single, in a certain level, Chazal already say that V'yaminu v'Hashem Moshe Avdoi Moshe Rabbeinu is shakal keneged kol Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu equals the 600,000 Yidden. Everyone Moshe Rabbeinu, what he experiences and what he has to go through on a personal level is what all of Klal Yisrael is going through as well. So the Rizal told like this, that Moshe Rabbeinu there was a number of Gilgulim, of Nishmas Moshe, before Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Moshe Rabbeinu, the person Moshe Rabbeinu that came to the world at that time, was really the third incarnation. Rizal said that Moshe was a Gilgul of Hevel, Shes. Hevel was killed by Cain, right? Then he comes back as Shes, the third son of Adam, and then he comes back as Moshe. And that's what the Rizal taught. Again, we're not going to why Hevel and Shes, that's not the point right now, but Moshe is the third Gilgul of that neshama, and that's why the Rizal said the word Moshe is a Rosh Tevis. Moshe, Mem is Moshe, Shin is Shes, and He is the Hevel. So it's telling you his history. So it's Moshe, Shes, and Hevel. Okay. Now, the Rizal taught, though, that by the time Moshe Rabbeinu is standing by the burning bush, so it means that Moshe Rabbeinu is coming into the world, and his job is not only to fix himself, to misakin his neshama. His job, since he's a Gilgul of those previous two tzaddikim, his job is to be mashlim, to complete the names of those two tzaddikim as well. Now, the Rizal taught that by the time Moshe Rabbeinu was standing by the burning bush, he was mashlim, he was misakin those three letters of his name. The mem, that's his name, Moshe, the shin of the name Shes, and He from the name Hevel. But the three remaining letters, the Tuf of the name Shes, right? The Beis Lamed of the name Hevel, that he wasn't yet misakin. And those three letters that were remaining without tikkun, without rectification, without perfection, that's those three letters, Tuf, Beis, Lamed, is the letters Tevel. Tevel in Tanakh means inhabited place. Like we say the first, the Shir Shel Yom on Sunday, Lashem ha'aretz u'malaya, that Hashem has the whole world and heaven and so on. Tevel v'yoshveva. Tevel, Tuf, Beis, Lamed. And Tevel means not just the earth, but the specific parts of the earth that are inhabited, right? You could have dry land, but the Sahara Desert is not inhabited. Tevel means the part of the earth that's inhabited. The letters Tuf, Beis, Lamed, which are the remaining letters of Shes and Hevel, minus the letters of Moshe, those were not Masukan yet. Said the Arizal, and this is what's hinted to with the fire that Moshe Rabbeinu sees by the burning bush. The fire of the burning bush represents those remaining letters of Moshe's name, of Shes and Hevel's names, that have not yet been rectified. This is why it says in the pasuk that the Malach of Hashem appeared to him, Balabas Eish. Labas, Lamed, Beis, Tuf, is the same letters as those remaining letters of Shes and Hevel. Tevel, Labas, it's the same word. So V'yar Malach Hashem Ela Balabas Eish, said the Arizal as follows. So those remaining letters are metaphorically represented by the fire, by the Labas Eish. More than that, said the Arizal, and there was one specific Rasha whose Iker Yenika, whose source of life was coming from those imperfected letters. And that was none other than Bilam. Bilam, again, without going into too much detail, Bilam, who's the arch enemy of Moshe Rabbeinu, Chazal say that, like Pasuk says, like Kam Moshe. No one is like Moshe Rabbeinu. Chazal say, but that's by Yidden, by Umas Oilam, by the other side, there is someone that's the mirror image, the opposite of Moshe Rabbeinu in Klippa, and that's Bilam. Bilam is his name is divided into two parts: Beis Lamed, Am. So Bilam represents all the nations of the world, just like Moshe represents all of Klal Yisrael. Bilam represents Am. He represents the entire world as well. And the two letters that he embodies in order to do that was Beis and Lamed, which are the two unrectified letters two out of the three unrectified letters of Tuf, Beis, Lamed, remaining from Shes and Hevel. In other words, said the Arizal, as long as those letters are unrectified, it means there's still a power that Bilam is coming from. Bilam is still being yonik from that. Now, said the Ari HaKadosh, at this moment, when Moshe Rabbeinu was standing by the burning bush, the Rebbeinu Shalom is charging him and telling him, you want to take Klal Yisrael out? This is how it's going to happen. Be masakin those remaining letters. Well, misakin was, V'yar Malach Hashem Ela B'laba Seish B'toich Hasneh. This is the revelation of the burning bush, is that the fire that is Golus Mitzrayim, right? Like Chazal say, the fire is a metaphor to Golus Mitzrayim. Based on this Arizal, what's happening is that the fire of the burning bush, which is a metaphor to Golus Mitzrayim, is being explained. You know why Golus Mitzrayim is, you know what it is. Golus Mitzrayim is a result of those three letters of your name, Tef, Taf, Beis, Lamed, of Shes and Hevel, not being fully rectified. And those unrectified letters are necessitating Golus Mitzrayim. Golus Mitzrayim is there because of those unrectified letters. And by the way, therefore, it's not a coincidence that who was the one that gave Para the Eitzah of subjugating the Jewish people in slavery? It was Bilam, right? Chazal say it was Bilam. And so why is that? Because again, this is what's going on over here. Those three letters, which remain unrectified, which is the source of Bilam, they need to become rectified. And Golus Mitzrayim is a way of rectifying those letters. So although what seems to be something personal with Moshe Rabbeinu, that now he's standing by the burning bush and V'yar Malach Hashem Elu B'la B'seish, and now those letters are he's being given the task of fully rectifying them. The rectification of those letters is connected with his shlichus to take the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. So in other words, the Golus of Mitzrayim, which was an Eitzah from Bilam, is synonymous with the unfortunate reality of these letters being unrectified, which in other words means that the purpose of Golus Mitzrayim and the catharsis and the refuah that is Golus Mitzrayim is to eventually result in these letters being rectified through the suffering. And so Golus Mitzrayim is wrapped up in this sugya of these letters of Labas, of Tevel, becoming rectified. And this is why it's ironic that Bilam, who's drawing his life from these unrectified letters, is the one that gives the Eitzah to enslave the Jewish people, which through our suffering rectifies these letters and cuts him off from his life force. And so that's always the way it works. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin that the trees themselves produce the handle for the axe to cut themselves down. That's the way it works. The klipa always, without realizing it, makes the Jewish people suffer, but the suffering itself is the tikkun for whatever that klipa was, whatever that difficulty was. So in other words, from this Arizal, we're seeing the following idea, that the purpose of Golus Mitzrayim, the reason why it was necessary, and what ultimately Golus Mitzrayim is there to rectify, is something that's personal to Moshe. But if it's personal to Moshe, it means it's for all of Klal Yisrael, which means to rectify those remaining letters of Shes and Hevel, Taf, Beis, Lamed. Those letters were unrectified, and therefore something's got to give. We have to fix that, and so the way to fix it is through the suffering of Golus Mitzrayim. And once these letters have been somewhat rectified, or the process has happened enough, the Rebbeinu Shalom appears to Moshe, B'la B'seish. Okay, now let's go take them out. These letters have been rectified enough to take them out of Mitzrayim, and the rest will be history. So, in other words, just doing some basic mathematics of inyanim that we have no idea what I'm talking about. So this is all completely above all of our heads right now. But what we have so far is, again, the question is, what is the purpose of Golus Mitzrayim? So now we have three answers, and they all mean the same thing, just somehow. Answer number one, the purpose of Golus Mitzrayim, and by extension, all suffering on some level. Number one is to know the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, Aleph. Another reason for Golus Mitzrayim is what? Is to be zeicher to Torahs Eretz Yisrael. Beis, that's Beis. Gimel, the final reason why you need Golus Mitzrayim, and again, by extension, all suffering, is in order to fix those three letters of the names Shes and Hevel, of Taf, Beis, Lamed. And those three things, to know Yud Kei Vav Kei, Torahs Eretz Yisrael, and fixing Taf, Beis, Lamed, must all be the same. Follow? Okay. What in the world am I talking about? What does this all mean? Okay, so here. So I'm going, by way of introduction, I'm going to tell you that we're going to finish the shir tonight, so don't worry. I'm not going to leave a question hopefully unanswered, but I'm just going to explain a principle without really explaining why the Rebbeinu Shalom makes this principle. So there's going to be questions sort of that this is going to bring up. But that for tonight, we're just introducing the principle. Okay, so we'll go like this. This time of year is Shavim, yeah? Shavim. So by Mekubalim, they do a lot of fasting by Shavim. There's a lot of fasting. So let's talk about for a few minutes the sugya of fasting. And there's an interesting, it'll be, l'shem learning. Okay, so don't worry. This doesn't obligate us to actually fast. So like this, listen, in Torah we have a number of fasts, right? So obviously Yom Kippur, it's a fast day, and we have fast days revolving around Beis Hamikdash and so on, and that's basically what you find. What we have interesting though is that we from the Rishonim, especially Chachmei Ashkenaz, you don't find it necessarily by too many other places, but Chachmei Ashkenaz, famously by the Rekeach and the Sefer Chassidim, Rabbi Levi, there's an idea that they introduced that's called there's a number of different words for it, but they introduced this idea of extensive fasting for particular Aveiros. Again, I'm not saying this halacha l'maisa, but just to know, Chachmei Ashkenaz, there's this idea from Chachmei, going back to the Rishonim of Ashkenaz. Again, like I said, the Rekeach, the Sefer Chassidim, that they talk about this a lot. They actually give a list of this sin requires this amount of fasting. Shuvas HaMishkal, it's called. All different words to describe it. Like this sin requires this amount of fasting. And so it's an interesting thing because we don't find this idea in Chazal per se of certain Aveiros require certain fasting. We do find in Chazal the idea that some tzaddikim in the Gemara, when they sinned on their level, they would be makabel tainus. But such a system, an organized way of fasting, it's a little bit interesting. So there's what's fascinating is that when you look at those farm again, the Rekeach, the Sefer Chassidim, and so on, when they give their list, the category of sins that they generally speak about are heavy ones, chayvi misas, krisis, sins that carry heavy punishment, and so those are the Aveiros that usually they're talking about in terms of what you might call it in terms of fasting. Now, what's fascinating is that that's all from the Rishonim in Ashkenaz. Like I said, the Sfaradim didn't have much of a tradition like this, but comes the Arizal, and in one of his Sfarim in Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh, the Arizal gives what seems to be a similar idea, a list of Aveiros with corresponding numbers of fasts. Now, what's interesting with the Arizal, though, is that the Aveiros that he deals with are not necessarily the biggest things in the world. I mean, relatively speaking. And what's interesting is that the numbers of fasts that he gives corresponding to whatever Aveira it is are not necessarily relative to the severity of the sin. So you could have something that's technically a darabanan that a person violates, but has more numbers of fasts in the system of the Arizal than an Aver Midaraisa. And the reason for this is because the numbers of fasts that the Arizal gives to us for this list of Averas are not, like I said, it's not based on severity, it's based on the gematrias of certain Shemus HaKadoshim that the Arizal wants to activate, or wants you to activate as a tikkun to fix that particular sin. So whatever Shemus HaKadoshim need to be activated, the gematria of those Shemus, that's the number of fasts that you're going to do. That's why it's famous at this time of year by Shovim. Okay, maybe we could talk about this throughout Shovim. We could mention this idea that this time of year is to be Masaki in the specific Aveira of Shmir Sabris. And the Rizal said that it has to do with 84 fasts. 84, Peidal Tanesim. That's not necessarily because of the severity of the Aveira, that's just the Gemachis of the Shemus HaKadoshim is 84. Okay, but these are the two systems that we have, from the Rishonim and you have from the Rizal. So the question is that the Acharim deal with is that how do we relate the two to each other? What's the fundamental purpose of the fasts of the Rishonim and their system versus the purpose of the fast that the Arizal introduces? Okay, so it's like this. The Gemara tells us. I'll give you a little bit. Let's focus on the Rishonim for a second. The Rekeach, the Sefer Chassidim. What's the background that they're coming from when they introduce this idea of having X number of fasts for the Averos that they're talking about? So the explanation is as follows. It's pretty simple. The Gemara says in Yuma, it's a famous Gemara at the end of Yuma, the Gemara says that if a person, God forbid, sins with an assay or a lois assay, with an assay, the Gemara says, okay, so you do tshuva, finished. You're nimchol miyad, it's taken care of. Says the Gemara, no, if you violated a lois assay, then also tshuva takes care of it with Yom Kippur. So you do tshuva, and then Yom Kippur comes, you're good to go. Says the Gemara though, but if the person violated something that's chiyav misa, krisis, and so on, so you do tshuva, and tshuva is the primary tikkun, you also need Yom Kippur, but then you also need Yisurin. you also need some suffering. Again, now what does suffering mean? That's not doesn't have to be chas v'shalom something incredibly difficult, but technically it requires yisurin. And famously, the Gemara then says, but in Chil Hashem, if the sin was done, let's say barabim or whatever, and it caused the Chil Hashem, so then even yisurin is not enough. The person's misa at the right time after 120, it'll finish the job as well. So the Rishonim come, the Rekeach and so on, and they're coming with the following idea. The Aveiros that they're talking about, like I said, they're not dealing with the, with minor league Aveiros. They're talking about the serious ones. The ones that the Gemara says in Yuma require Yisurin. So the Rishonim come in, the Rekeach and the Sefer Chassidim are coming to give us a little bit of an Eitzah. Instead of waiting, God forbid, for the Rebbeinu Shalom and from the Bezin Shalmala to send Yisurin, which you might not be expecting at the right time, timing might be, it's not what you wanted that afternoon. So the Rekeach and the Sefer say, so bring it upon yourself. In other words, be makabel tanesem. And by fasting, and they give certain numbers because that's what they felt would be sort of enough Yisurin for those Aveiros, you're makabel the Yisurin on your own, and that fulfills the requirement of Yisurin that the Gemara says in Yuma a person might need, but then it's on your own cheshbon. I'm saying you can decide, when you want to do it, when, you're sort of in control of that. So that's the concept of the Baal Rekeach. Okay. Now, because of this, the Achronim say that the only time that this is recommended, again, nowadays, put it this way, the Achronim say, the Baal Tanya and many other Achronim say that because this is what the concept of the Yisurin are about, and this is only, first of all, if a person can handle it. You don't want to take upon yourself Yisurin that you can't handle, right? Obviously, we're talking about, so they say, first of all, we're talking about generations or people that are used to fasting, so it wasn't like such a big deal, Aleph. And Beis, it's also only true, you only want to do this if it's not going to disrupt your Avodas Hashem. So the classic example is if a person is involved in learning all day, right? And by fasting, he's not going to be able to learn. So then Yatzaschar V'Seidah, you're trying to do this in order to be masakin the sin that you committed. By what? By causing bittul Torah. So, you're just replacing one problem with another problem. So it's not kedai. But this is where the Rekeach is coming from. Okay. Now, the Arizal is something else. And I'll prove to you how. The Arizal, there's two different places in the Arizal where he talks about whether a Talmid Chacham and someone that's involved in learning should be makabel these fasts. Okay. So I'll read to you one place in just a couple lines. And there's a Sefer Charedim. The Sefer Charedim quotes from the Arizal the following thing. We actually don't have it in our Kisvei, but this is what the Sefer Charedim quotes. He says, "B'shem the Arizal, Kol ma shetimsa v'divrei harishayim." All the fasts that you find in the Rishonim, like I mentioned, Teichachas alavim, because of certain Aveiros. So he says, "Loi niskru el mi she'enam ala b'Torah." That's only for someone that is not constantly learning, and the fasting is not going to disrupt his avodas Hashem. But someone who's learning, and someone's involved in avodas Hashem, then by keeping these fasts, so you're trying to fix that aveira, but then you're causing yourself to be weakened in your avodas Hashem in other areas. So it's not kedai. So what should he do? So there is what the person should do is don't stop learning. Do what you learn. Maybe take one day. Take one day in more of isolation, more of introspection. Take a day of doing an inner tshuva, but be makabel fasting in order to fix those aveiros on the cheshbon of your avodas Hashem. It's not kedai. Okay. What's interesting is that in the Sefer Sharuch HaKodesh, as an introduction, before the Arizal talks about his list of aveiros with his corresponding list of fast days, this is what the Arizal says. He says you should know. Shemi shaloi chata miyamav. Someone, as a general concept about his fast, he says someone that certainly never sinned and just wants to fast stamazai, a Talmid Chacham, someone who's learning, that's what he's talking about, someone that's learning, ain't tzarich l'sanai, certainly should not fast because it's going to weaken his learning and it's not kedai. But he says, but someone who has sinned in these sins that I'm about to list, even if he's a Talmid Chacham and it's going to weaken his learning, he has no choice. He has to, in order to clean himself out, and bring a tikkun to whatever he damaged. So this is the steer that the Sfardish Achronim point to, which is what did the Rizal hold in terms of a Talmid Chacham taking on these additional fasts? On the one place the Charedim brings down from the Rizal that a Talmid Chacham should not take on these additional fasts that the Rishonim mentioned, but yet in Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh, Rizal says no. If a Talmid Chacham violated one of these sins, then he has no choice. He has to be misakin himself, and he has no choice but to fast. So which one is it? So the answer is, and the Sfardi Shachronim explain it as follows: that there's a fundamental difference between the fasting that the Rishonim introduced versus the fasting that the Arizal introduced. When the Sefer Charedim brings down from the Arizal that a Talmid Chacham should not take on these additional fasts, it was talking about, the words were Kol Ma Shetimsav Divrei Rishonim. The fasting that the Rishonim introduced, the Rekeach, Sefer Chasidim, that the Arizal said is not kedai. You're doing that in order to fix some Vaeira on the cheshbon of Bittul Torah. It's not kedai. But then there's something else. Then there's the new category of fasting that the Arizal is personally introducing in Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh. That the Arizal says you should do even if you're a Talmid Chacham. Why? What's the fundamental idea behind the fasting that the Arizal introduces? And here's the point over here. And then we'll get back to Galus Mitzrayim. And once I introduce this idea, the rest will go very quickly. There's a certain piece. It's an old sefer from the Arizal, and it's interesting. It was first written as a separate sefer by Reb Chaim Vital, but then only a couple generations later, it was cut and pasted and incorporated and scattered throughout the Kisvei Ari. So Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, for example, one of the things you should be well. One of the things that he's done is that he sort of what's the word? He's taken apart the Kisvei we have and sort of re-engineered the original version. So there's one of the original svarim from the Arizal, from the Reb Chaim Vital, is a sefer called Oilas HaTamid. So in Oilas HaTamid, the following paragraph is written, and it was, and this was written originally as an introduction to Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh, to the sefer where the Arizal talks about his fasts and the cheshbon. And this is what he says. Listen to this. And this is a whole different perspective. Again, bear in mind, the Rishonim introduced the idea of fasting to just replace the Yisurin that the Bezin Shamayla might send a person for a series of errors. But comes the Arizal and says, this is the idea. Yudua, it's known. Sha'achet pagam the kesem v'nefesh, that a sin, for example, can cause stains on the soul. A soul can be stained. Nefesh can have stains on it. And so the Arizal. Ukeshehi b'tinufa. When a soul is stained, when a soul is not purified 100%, then a soul that had listen, a person is born into the world with a brain, with a good intellect, so you can learn Torah. But said there is, but there's such a thing. There's a madrega that's called to be masig Sedes HaTorah, to understand secrets of Torah. And when the Arizal says is what the Arizal is referring to over here is not to understand something on an intellectual level, mathematics and so on. He's talking about the ability of a soul to experience divinity, to experience spirituality. For a person to experience that which the physical senses can't experience on their own. To be masig Sedes HaTorah, you understand? To truly experience that which is not physical, that which is beyond the scope of regular human experience. And said the Arizal, while a neshama is unless a neshama is purified and refined completely, it won't be able to experience Sedes HaTorah. It won't be able to experience divinity. It won't be able to experience the Rabbanu Shalom. You can learn about the Rabbanu Shalom, and you'll be able to navigate through life properly, serving the Rabbanu Shalom, but to really fully experience what mitzvahs are. Again, not how to do them, but truthfully, what a mitzvah is. What is the universe of tefillin that you are entering when you put on tefillin? That requires a certain purification of the soul. And said the Arizal, every neshama needs to be refined by this. When a person sins, the imperfection of the soul is doubled down, it's intensified. And without purification, the soul, these ideas and the Yidishkeit itself is not shining by the person. It's not shining by the person. There's a certain timtum halev, there's a certain coarseness that the person has that doesn't allow him to truly experience the reality of Yidishkeit. The reality of Yidishkeit. When I say reality of Yidishkeit, I think you understand what I'm saying, that I don't just mean the technical details of how to live from life. We're talking about how to experience Shabbos as a living organism, a reality. That's something that requires a taharas halev, a taharas hanefesh. And said the Arizal, just like a mirror, says the Arizal, a mirror that is the appearances on the mirror, the light that shines on the mirror is not going to be. It's not going to be clear and glowing and shining properly if there's a lot of finger marks and stains on the mirror. So the same thing with the nefesh. For the light of Torah, the reality of the Rebbeinu Shalom, for it to shine forth truthfully in the neshama, for it to be experienced as a truthful reality, as something that's actually real and as tangible as this world, that requires a certain taharas halev. Says the Arizal. It says Ruchai Vital, I should say. Kach hanefesh ha'cholos. So a soul that's sick with all these fingerprints, and all these marks. Lahasser ha'cholim mimena tzarich she'ikabel of meriras harafuah. In order to be purified and to be healed, the neshama has to go through Yisurin. But you see what the Arizal is talking about over here. The Yisurin that Arizal is introducing us to is a whole different category of purpose than what, for example, Chazal mentioned at the end of Gemara Yuma. The end of Gemara Yuma is talking about the process of making sure you don't have to go to Gehenna. Making sure that you didn't have Vaeira, you need a punishment. Einshim. Okay, so the Gemara says, a big Aveiris, there's a big Einshim hanging over a person's head. Tshuva is not enough. So you have to have some level of Yisurin. So for there, the Rishonim introduce, okay, you know what? So instead of having to go through Yisurin, that Bez and Shemalah decides, take it upon yourself on your own way, and fulfill that requirement on your own. But that's all just to avoid punishment. But the Rizal is talking about something else altogether. The Rizal says, fine, punishment to hand, punishment to hair, fine. You're not going to be punished. Or you don't care about being punished. It's not, but that's not the Inyan. The Rizal says, but there's something else that the soul needs to experience. The soul needs to become refined to allow it to become sensitive to Ruchnias. Yeah.
Would you mind, I'm sure we'll get to this, would you mind explaining a little bit how sometimes the process of refinement leads paradoxically to a further stage?
So that we're going to have to see about that. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get that. But,
you go into Mitzrayim and then...
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get into that now. Like I said, it's going to open up other questions, it should be opened up, don't get me wrong, but just to establish the principle. So says the Rizal, there is another purpose of Yisurin, a deeper purpose of Yisurin, which is to allow the person to be masig, the mahus, the essence of Torah, and the truth of Yidishkeit, and the essence of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Not just about God and to serve Him, but to allow the soul to experience it in truth. And that's what the fast days of the Arizal are there for. And the Arizal, therefore, is not coming to tell you only the big Aveiros and so on. These specific Aveiros that the Arizal handpicks are the Aveiros that, for whatever reason, have this quality of enhancing, of putting very, very thick fingerprints on the mirror of the soul to block the mirror from experiencing light. You understand? From taking away the sensitivity of the neshama. And to fix that, it's not a matter of severity of sin. There's certain shemus hakdoshim and the cheshbon of the Arizal that need to be worked through in order for the soul to become purified. And therefore, said the Arizal, if you're fasting for the cheshbon of the Rishonim to get rid of punishment over yourself, yeah, but if it's causing bittul Torah, it's not kedai. Your biggest priority is to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom, not to avoid punishment. But said the Arizal, but if you're fasting on my cheshbon, with my cheshbonis, which is what? Which is in order to be masik Torah, to experience Torah and to truly understand what Yidishkeit is. That's not the cheshbon of bittul Torah. That's part of learning. That's in order to allow yourself to truly learn. You're not going to be spending as many hours in learning because you're going to be weak from fasting, but that's not bittul Torah. Without that, then you're not truly learning. You don't understand what Yidishkeit is. So it's not just avoiding punishment. That's taharas halev. In other words, what we see from the Arizal, I'm just using this as a way of introducing an idea. What we're seeing from the Arizal is a new idea, which is that suffering, instead of it being something just there to remove punishment for some Vaeira that was committed, which is true and it has its place. But the Arizal is revealing to us that there is something else at play with Yisurin, that there is a reality that Yisurin produce, which is a certain zikuch halev, a certain purification of the heart, a transparency of the heart, and which is for what purpose? To allow the Jewish person not just to keep mitzvahs, but to allow the soul to truly experience mitzvahs for what they really are. That Yidishkeit should become something that's alive, that's real, and tangible. Spirituality and elokus and divinity and the Rabbanu Shalom's presence should be something that's 100% real. That is a fundamental purpose of Yisurim. Now let's go back, using this idea of what Yisurim can be. Again, in the system of the Rizal, it's there to be masakin this pollution and this coarseness that comes as a result of certain sins. But the idea of Yisurim being mamarkin, of Yisurim allowing the soul to experience truth, this is something that the Jewish collective soul needed to go through by Galus Mitzrayim. Let's go back. Galus Mitzrayim, we said, is not because of an Vaeira. Yeah, you could go back and attribute it to Mechiras Yosef, but it goes before that. And by an extension, the suffering that a Jewish person has to go through in the world is also not be'etzim because of necessarily a person's sins. Yeah, a person's sins will double down on it. It'll increase, it'll intensify the need for Yisurin. But fundamentally, the purpose of Yisurin is because the Rebbeinu Shalom wants every single Jewish person, every single Jewish soul, not just to receive the Torah, but to receive the Torah of Eretz Yisrael. What do I mean, the Torah of Eretz Yisrael? Rav Kook talks about this a lot, that Torah in Chutz La'aretz, for example, Torah in Chutz La'aretz versus Torah in Eretz Yisrael. Torah in Eretz Yisrael is a Torah that's Rav Kook used the language of tivi. It's natural. It's alive. It's breathing. It's not concepts. It's not just Zroim is not just something that's on the shelf. You could feel it. It's a living, breathing reality. The Rabbanu Shalom, in order for Yidishkeit to become something that's real and the soul to experience the essence of Yiddishkeit itself, not just ideas, that requires a certain level of Yisurin. Now, as I said, how much Yisurin doesn't have to be extreme. And the Tzaddikim have already told us that in our generations, any level of Mesiras Nefesh, of putting your kaiches into Avodas Hashem, that's also Yisurin. Sitting through the shir is Yisurin, right? So it's also Yisurin. But any level of Yisurin is there is a Taharas Alev, a Zikuch HaNefesh that automatically comes as a result of Yisurin. That's not because of an Aveira per se. It's just the natural Zikuch that is required for a Neshama to experience something that's beyond its normal domain. And any time a soul is tasked with experiencing something that's beyond its normal way of its normal boundaries, it's in order to open itself up for that deeper level of reality of Ruchnias is going to need some level of Yisurin. It's going to need some level of Mesiras Nefesh and Avodah Yisurin. That's what it's going to require. This is what Galus Mitzrayim was, and this is let's go back. The Rabbanu Shalom said, you know why there's Galus Mitzrayim over here? Is because without Galus Mitzrayim, Vaeira el Avram el Yitzchak el Yaakov bekel Shakai. I appeared to the Ovis by the name Kel Shakai. Ushmi Havaya lo yinadati lehem. To appear with the name Kel Shakai means appearing. A vision means something there, and I have a vision of it. I see it from a distance. When I see something from a distance, I don't necessarily know what it is. I don't feel it. I don't truly understand it. It's a vision. It's something from a distance, right? But if you want to, and so it says the Rabbanu Shalom, I appear to the Avos HaKadoshim in the name Kel Shakai. Kel Shakai is a name that's associated with what the Rabbanu Shalom does. I've mentioned this many times. Kel Shakai are names that are associated with the creation of the world. Kel is a name that corresponds to Chesed. Olam Chesed Yibana. Chesed, Kel Kol Hayom. The creation was an act of Chesed. And Shakai is Shomer Lo Olam Eidai. The Rabbanu Shalom was creating the world, and he saw this is a perfect size for planet Earth. It's a perfect size for Saturn. Shomer Lo Olam Eidai. Kel Shakai are names that correspond to an awareness of God in terms of just by knowing that He's there through what He does. But you don't know who God is. Says the Rabbanu Shalom, without Galus Mitzrayim, without Yisurin, it's not because of an Aveira per se. Now it is true. Because of it, just like in the system of fasting of the Arizal, because of Aveiris, this impurity of the soul, this coarseness of the soul is increased. And so Mechiras Yosef certainly did not help. And the Lashon Hara of the Jewish people, Mitzrayim, certainly did not help. But the ultimate fundamental need of Yisurin is basic in terms of allowing a neshama to become open to deeper levels than what it's accustomed to, and deeper truths, and absorbing and what was until that point a vision from a distance, to become ushmi havaya neidati, to have a knowledge of not God the Creator, but God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Rebbeinu Shalom Himself. And this is synonymous with what? With Torah's Eretz Yisrael. Again, like I said, the other explanation of Golus Mitzrayim, in order to receive the Torah and Eretz Yisrael, in order to receive Torah's Eretz Yisrael. Because Torah's Eretz Yisrael means to be masig Seides HaTorah, to experience Elikos, to experience Yidishkeit as a pulsating, living, breathing reality that requires Yisurin. It requires Yisurin. Again, as I said, with Aveiris, the Yisurin become more intensified, the requirements. But this is a fundamental reality of life, that in order to, whatever is real to you, whatever is alive to you, whatever you fully experience, there's always going to be, there's levels of Ruchnius that are beyond that border, and it's just concepts. In order to move you to the next arena, that what was until now a vision of Kel Shakai, to become knowing Yud Kei Vav Kei, it requires Yisurin. Now again, like I said, with Aveiris, then you're already behind the 8 ball. But the very mitzias of being masik Seides HaTorah requires Yisurin, it requires Mesiras Nefesh, it requires a breaking on some level of the self. And this is what the Gemara says. The Gemara says in Brachas that Yisurin is compared to salt. Just like salt softens the meat, right, and allows the flavors to penetrate the meat, and the meat is altogether changed by the flavors. That the rub that you put on the meat is not just something that the meat has a shaykhis to. It becomes part of the meat. Says the Gemara, that's what salt does. Salt allows the flavors to become part of the meat itself, and the meat's universe is now one with those flavors. So Chazal say that's what Yisurin does to the Jew. That's what suffering does to a Jew. It allows what was until that point a nice idea and some theory become Torah's Chaim, to become an essential thing. And this is also related to those 3 letters of Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's understand. Moshe Rabbeinu is charged in the world not just to give us the Torah, but Moshe Rabbeinu is specifically handpicked to give us a living Torah, to give us a Torah that is something that the Jewish people and the Jewish soul is able to experience. That is the ultimate job of Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu, therefore, is not only the one to give us the Torah, not only required to bring the Torah to the earth, but his job ultimately is to bring the Torah to Tevel v'Yashveva, to the inhabited part of the earth. Because bringing the Torah to earth means we could put on talis and tefillin. But bringing the Torah to the inhabited part of the earth means that it becomes as experiential to you and as real to you as every other part of your life. And that's what it means that Moshe Rabbeinu was required not just to bring the Torah to earth, but to be masakin all of the letters of his name of Tevel, of Hevel and Shais, in order that the Torah should be able to not just be given to planet Earth, but Lashem Aretz Malaya Tevel v'Yeshveva. And that's exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu is about. And again, the fire of Labas Eish, which is what Golus Mitzrayim was metaphorically represented by, is telling Moshe Rabbeinu this is what it's about. What it's about is to make Yidishkeit something that's absolutely real and concrete and inhabitable, like Eretz Yisrael, which is an inhabitable place on earth, not just an idea, but where Torah and Yiddishkeit become essentially real. This is, by the way, we'll just end with this. This is why Bilam is the opposite of this. Right? I've mentioned this before. Bilam thrives when those letters of Tevel are still incomplete. When Yiddishkeit is just a concept, an idea, and something that we do, but not necessarily something that we experience in the soul, that's where Bilam thrives. Bilam was someone that, even in the simple story of Bilam, we find this. Bilam knows about God. Bilam is experiencing nevuah, but he doesn't care about what God really wants. You understand? It's like he just needs permission, right? He just needs to he's just trying to finagle God to give him permission to curse the Jewish people. Like he knows that God doesn't want him to curse the Jewish people, but he needs permission. So Bilam is the classic example of an awareness of God that's completely superficial, that it has not penetrated the meat. You understand? It's not a real reality. The reality to Bilam is this world. and the money that's being offered to him by Balak. That's real. Yeah, the Rebbeinu Shalom, he doesn't want to go to Gehenna, or so he needs official permission, but that's not real. You understand? Bilam, that's why Bilam is the expert in the world on kishuf, on witchcraft. See, Yidishkeit, I'm going to say strong words, but Rav Nachman writes this in the first L'Kut Moran. Yidishkeit without this idea, without Moshe Rabbeinu, without Tevel V'yesh Reva, without Galus Mitzrayim, is also kishuf. What are we doing? Leather boxes, tying it on, you know what I mean, and saying magic words and lighting candles. It's kishuf. It's hocus pocus. Say such a thing. Rav Nachman writes such a thing, that if you learn Pnimis HaTorah without truly having a purified heart to on some level experience it, then what's the difference between that and kishuf? Now, chas v'shalom, we still have to keep Torah mitzvahs, because we ultimately went through Galus Mitzrayim, which means that on some level we are experiencing Yidishkeit. But without the Galus Mitzrayim, theoretically, a Jew, without going through any level of Yisurin at all, and then just being a Yiddishkeit, it's kishuf. It's all hocus pocus. It's just things that you do that's not a real thing. What's real is what's in front of you. And some mysterious energies out there, you're trying to tap into, whatever. But what is Yiddishkeit? Yiddishkeit's not kishuf, chas v'shalom. Why is Yiddishkeit not kishuf? Because it's real. It's as real and as practical and as down to earth and as tangible as the table that you're sitting in front of. But that's all true because of Galus Mitzrayim, because of the concept of Yisurin. Now again, as I said, it introduces bigger questions. But suffice it to say that this idea is a truth. It is the truth. What level of Yisurin does a person have to go through in order to break through that personal barrier and to allow the soul to experience levels of Ruchnius that until that point are just concepts, and to make it real? Dafka, does it have to be with intense fasting and things like that? Adrabah, the tzaddikim from the Baal Shem Tov already has recommended not to take on that type of suffering. But the person has to, like I said, Mesiras Nefesh, to push oneself in Avodas Hashem beyond their comfort zone, that's also Yisurin. That's also Yisurin, to learn more, to daven harder, to watch oneself from doing Averis more. That's also Yisurin. And there's a purpose in that. That the Yisurin itself becomes like salt to allow yourself to experience more. It's Masak in those letters of Tevel, that the Rebbeinu Shem should exist in the world that's inhabited, an inhabited place. Torah Eretz Yisrael. This is why Chazal say that Olam Haba, Eretz Yisrael, and Torah are only acquired with Yisurin. What does it mean to acquire something? To be kind of something. To be kind of something means that you have full ownership, full possession, full dominance over this thing. You understand what it is. It's not an idea. Vaeira el Avram Yitzchak Yaakov means that the Rebbeinu Shalom wasn't acquired by them. To acquire, to know the Rebbeinu Shalom, that means to acquire it. To acquire Torah, to acquire Eretz Yisrael, to acquire Olam Haba. Olam Haba means to experience the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's through Yisur. And it's through Mesiras Nefesh. That's the Ikra Avodah Mesiras Nefesh. When you do that, then everything that you do with Mesiras Nefesh, all the mitzvahs that you do with Mesiras Nefesh, it takes on a deeper level. It takes on in the soul, it becomes a reality. Not just something that you're doing, it becomes a reality. Now, by the time that reality, for it to bubble to the surface of, your monkey brain, you know what I mean? It might take some time. But through years of Avodah, or maybe less than years of Avodah, but real Mesiras Nefesh and Avodas Hashem, slowly but surely Yiddishkeit will become real to you, ad kedei kach, where the very concept of not serving the Rebbeinu Shalom properly could make a person physically ill. You can become physically ill by thinking about not doing mitzvahs and not serving Hashem properly. There's such madrigas like that by tzaddikim. How they get to such a place? Make a person physically ill. Smelling something, a rotten piece of meat makes a person nauseous. The thought of Chil Shabbos can make a person nauseous. It can make a person nauseous because with Mesiras Nefesh and with Yisurin and Avodas Hashem, then Shabbos becomes as real, and Chil Shabbos becomes like a rotten piece of meat, and that's something that a Yid can aspire to and can reach. And we're already on the path because we experienced Galus Mitzrayim. So Rabban Shalom should just each one of us in our own lives to have a Torah Eretz Yisrael, to have a Torah Chaim, to have a Labas Eish, Tevel V'Yesh Reva, Shmi Hashem. We should be taka b'zachah to know intuitively and deeply. And with that, we should be zachah to come to that day. Kimol Artdeis Hashem, Kamayim Hamachas and Vias Kol Tzedek Meher V'Meinu Amen. No, that's for sure.
Before, like meaning. B'nai Yisrael went to the Memtes Shar to look before, meaning. Meaning.